Hey folks, welcome to chapter 4. This is our second chapter for this week. We're going to talk about choosing a form of business ownership. What we're going to learn this week is just really talk about the disadvantages and advantages of each one of the types of business ownership, whether it be sole proprietorship, partnership, corporations. We'll also look at the different types of corporations, whether that's S corps, C corps, or limited liability companies. And then we'll also examine the benefits and disadvantages of not-for-profit corporations. So let's get started. First of all, sole proprietorships. I'm sure many of you know somebody who owns one of these. These are a business that is owned and operated typically by one person. They are typically very small, although some can be big. Some of today's largest corporations actually start out as sole proprietorships. And they are the most popular form of business ownership. So if you think about restaurants, or you think about barbershops or dental offices, sometimes any small business that you see, many of those are sole proprietorships. And if you look here, the percentages of sole proprietorships in relation to partnerships and corporations, you can see that over 72% of all businesses in the United States are sole proprietorship, where 18% is a corporation and 10% typically are partnerships. However, if you look at the revenues per segment, you can see that corporations make up about 82% of all revenues, partnerships 14%, and sole proprietorships 4%. So it makes sense that there may be a lot, of small businesses, but because their margins are typically razor thin, they're not typically making as much money as large corporations. A large corporation can make in one day what one corporation can make over years. And so that's why you see the disparity between, even though there's more of them, corporations just generate more cash or more revenues. Here are the advantages and disadvantages of sole proprietorships. The advantages are they're easy to start up. It basically just takes some money, an idea, and you can get going. The pride of ownership, a lot of people, the reason they start their business is because, again, they feel pride about the fact that they've started something for themselves. Retention of profits, the owner keeps everything, doesn't have to share it with anybody. No special taxes. You can be your own boss, which is great. Now, some of the disadvantages, unlimited liability. And what unlimited liability means is if something happens on your property, if something happens with your business, you as a sole proprietor are fully responsible. That means you're responsible from not only the business perspective, but you're also potentially responsible as an individual. So they could come take your house if something catastrophic happens through your business. They can come seize, your personal assets. And so that's the thing about unlimited liability. You are responsible. Other ones, lack of continuity, right? You're all by yourself. There's really nobody there to bounce ideas off of. Lack of money, a lot of times it's harder to get money as a sole proprietor. Management skills, a lot of people who start businesses just don't know how to lead and don't know how to fully manage people. And then difficulty hiring. It's hard to find people, and that's not your main job if you're the entrepreneur, if you're the sole proprietor. If you own your own construction company, you know about building houses. You may not know about hiring or managing. Partnerships. Basically, partnerships is two or more people coming together to start a company. Right? It's a voluntary association of two or more persons to act as co-owners of a business. This form of ownership is much less common. Typically, people don't work well when it comes to ownership. It's like they say it's almost impossible to have two CEOs. When you have two people that come together as partners, typically what happens is it's hard to find somebody that you trust, that you can work with that much to actually form this partnership, and that's why they're so rare. There's no legal maximum in the number of partners. a partnership must have. Just basically more than one person. There's two types of partners. That's a general partner. That's a person who assumes full or shared responsibility for the business. And then a limited partner. A limited partner is that individual who basically just contributes cash. If you think of Shark Tank is a perfect example, they will fund companies and they'll take a certain partnership or a certain ownership stake in that company to give them money, but they have no say so of how the company is run or how it's managed. The advantages, startup ease, again, just like a partnership, just takes two people this time. Availability of capital, so more money. If you have two people, now you have the double the access typically to capital. Personal interest, so if two people have a shared interest, for example, if you want to start a bakery and you have somebody who's really good at selling baked goods and another person that's great at baking baked goods, then there's personal interest there, and then they can form this partnership and do well. Combined skills, that's kind of the same thing. Profit retention, you're still only divvying this up between two people or the number of partners instead of a bunch of people such as shareholders. Disadvantages, unlimited liability. Again, you're responsible for anything that happens within your company, both from your company perspective as well as your personal perspective. A lot of disagreements. I have lots of stories about partnerships that just did not work out and they dissolved, and they did not dissolve well. And so people wound up freezing assets. And so disagreements happen all the time. Lack of continuity. Again, if two people don't work well together, then there's going to be some difficulty. Again, frozen investment. If two partners disagree on something, they potentially have the capacity to freeze the entire operation, and then nobody's making any money. Okay. Corporations. Basically, a corporation, whether you realized it or not, is an artificial person created by law with most of the legal rights of a person. They can start and operate a business. They can buy or sell property. They can borrow money. They can sue and be sued, and they can enter into contracts. So a corporation, when you file a corporation, you have just created an individual. Okay. Now, unlike a real person, a corporation only exists on paper. Okay. Where to incorporate? We're talking about forming a corporation. Basically, a business is allowed to incorporate in any state that it chooses. Doesn't matter if you're doing business there or not, you can incorporate in any state you choose. There's a reason you do this. The decision is based on the cost of incorporating from one state versus another state, and then the advantages and disadvantages of each state's corporate laws. So Rhode Island is a great place to incorporate because they're so lax on corporations. Nevada is a great place to incorporate. A great place not to incorporate is California. Unfortunately, we just have so many strict laws. Forming a corporation here in California really does cost more. And so that's why you'll see a lot of corporations. Elon Musk relocated to Texas. A lot of companies relocated out of California or to Nevada because incorporating in those states is just easier, or they may push themselves overseas. So the different types of corporations, you have a domestic corporation. That's a corporation that does business or is in the state in which it is incorporated. So if you are in California doing business in California and you're incorporated in California, that means you're a domestic corporation. A foreign corporation is a corporation in any state in which it does business except the one it's incorporated. So again, if you're incorporated here in California, doing business in California, you're domestic. If all of a sudden you're doing business in Arizona or Nevada, now within those two states, you're actually a foreign corporation. Okay, so it's got nothing to do with international. An alien corporation, that's a corporation chartered by a foreign government and conducting business in the United States. So potentially you could look at that, could be a company like Alibaba. So that organization is headquartered out of China or Taiwan, and they're doing business here in the US. That would make them an alien corporation. Stockholder. So becoming a stockholder. So that's buying and selling stock. There's two types of stockholders or two types of stock. common stock and preferred stock. Common stock, basically, this type of stock, you're afforded more rights in terms of voting rights, in terms of being paid dividends potentially. So common stockholders can actually go to a board of directors meeting or a big stockholder assembly, and they can vote on different proxies or different things that are happening within that corporation. A preferred stockholder, they do not have that right. They are not allowed to vote when it comes to different matters within a corporation. However, common stockholders, if a company goes bankrupt, common stockholders, they lose their money. There's no way for them to recoup typically their money. How it usually works is when a company goes bankrupt, debtors, the people that they owe money to, typically get first. The government gets their taxes second, and then preferred stockholders typically will get their money. So preferred stockholders, even though they're not allowed to vote, they are allowed to potentially get their money back if a company goes bankrupt or something happens where common stockholders do not. Most people are common stockholders. Corporate structure. In a corporation, both the board of directors and the corporate officers are involved in management. So the board of directors, that's the top governing body that's actually elected by the stockholders. So those are those common stockholders who can potentially vote on the board of directors. The corporate officers, such as this is, we call it the C-suite, chairman of the board, the president, EVPs, corporate secretary, treasurer, those individuals are then selected by the board of directors. Okay. So how it works is the stockholders, who are the owners, elect the board of directors. The board of directors then appoint the officers, and then the officers then hire employees. Typically, upper management hires middle management then hires your day-to-day workers. Advantages of a corporation. Limited liability. The reason you incorporate is because you want to separate your personal assets from your corporate assets. So if something happens with the corporation, they can't touch your personal assets. Okay, that's the whole purpose. The corporation is now a separate individual who has all the rights and can again be sued, can sue. So the corporation is now separate from your organization, or I'm sorry, from your personal assets, and they are liable for anything that happens. Okay, so you can't be sued as an individual if you're the CEO or the owner of a corporation. Okay, so limited liability, that's important, probably the most important. Ease of raising capital. You basically can just sell stock now. As a corporation, you can sell stock. You can sell interest in your organization and still maintain control. Transfer of ownership, that's again that piece right there. Perpetual life, again, corporations have been around since the 1800s. And so there is no life, there's no limited life when it comes to corporations. Specialized management, each section, finance, HR, marketing, they all have their own specialized management. Disadvantages, it's difficult to form, costs money, and so you have to understand what you're getting into when you're forming this corporation. Government regulations. Once you form a corporation, the government can come look at anything they need to look at, and so you have special reporting, and so they're going to investigate you, SEC reporting, all that stuff. Okay, so more people looking into your business. Internal conflict, that happens in any double taxation. If you're the owner of a corporation, well, now you have to pay corporate taxes and you also have to pay your personal taxes. And then lack of privacy. Once you incorporate, everybody knows everything about you. Different types of corporations. So an S Corp is a corporation that is taxed as though it were a partnership. In other words, the corporation's income is taxed only as personal income of its stockholders. The regulations are there's no more than 100 stockholders are allowed. They must be individuals, estates, or certain trusts. No non-resident or alien shareholders can be involved, and there can only be one class of outstanding stock. Becoming an S corp corporation can be an effective way to avoid basically double taxation. That's the whole thing. But you get the legal benefit of an LLC. And here's an LLC, right? LLC is a form of business ownership that combines the benefits of a corporation and a partnership while avoiding the restrictions and disadvantage of those forms of ownership. So the advantages are single taxation, limited liability, and flexibility. Nonprofits, those are basically your churches, schools. It's an organization that provides typically social, educational, religious, or other services rather than to earn a profit. Museums, charities, private schools, all of these. And it's basically the nonprofit status is basically a tax status. And that's it. So that is chapter 4. I hope you all have a great week this week. And again, continue your reading, and we will talk to you soon.